Hey, where's the intro? Yes. I am Ando. I am your host. You gotta quit fucking around. As far as I'm concerned, that's a good thing.
A way to sort of cause trouble.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Alright, hello and welcome. This is Ando. We're in confusion about that intro. What do you guys think? Would you do us a favor? We would really like it if you would send us an email about the intro, because when we made it, we really liked it. We thought it was I don't know about appropriate, but we thought it was good and interesting, and of course we liked the music and it had a lot of energy and all that, and now that we've played it a couple of times, we're feeling like maybe it's not appropriate. You know, self-censorship's a bitch, so we've heard it too many times, we don't know. So would you do us a favor, would you just send us a one-word email, yay or nay? You can send that to holler@undergang.net, or you can send it to us on Twitter or whatever. Just please, for the love of God, some input. Just somebody tell us. Does it work, or is it just too crazy? Alright, but aside from that, we've got a great episode for you guys today. There's a lot to talk about. The theme is interesting problems. And God knows there's a lot of interesting problems out there. I mean, there is so much going on out there right now. It's crazy. Israel and Palestine are having at it. It is not going well over there. Iraq is having all sorts of trouble. And worst of all, Ann Coulter thinks that the interest in soccer in the US is a sign of its moral decay. Do you Danes know who Ann Coulter is? Ann Coulter is one of those women she's a pundit in the US. And she's one of those people who, you know how Europeans have an idea about Americans? They're loud, they're pretty dumb, they're prone to making grandiose statements with no fact or forethought behind them. Ann Coulter is the person that gives you guys that idea. Check her out. She's the devil. I'm proud to say, as an American, she is the devil. But, she thinks the increasing interest in soccer in the U.S. is because of the moral decay of that country. And it uses the metric system, which is goddamn frightening, So anyways, there's a lot of shit going on. There's a lot of interesting questions. The good news is we have this show and we have soccer. Tonight, after we're done recording and editing this, we're going to go cheer on the US of A, speaking of being loud and stupid, against Belgium, those sweet beer drinking so-and-sos. So, should be fun. We here at this show, the Undergang Armchair, are not afraid to say we do like soccer and we like morals. Today's guest is Francesca Astesani. She is an Italian who's been living in Denmark for a couple of years now. She worked at Anderson Contemporary for, I think, a year, and she started a company called South in the North, together with another interesting woman who we hope to have on the show sometime in the future. And they're in the art production business, which is an interesting thing. You kind of wonder what the hell art production is, and she's going to tell you about that. So yeah, it's a good talk about the nature of arts advocacy and production in Denmark, about the nature of the state in Denmark, all that other stuff we're going to talk about. So be sure to stick around after the episode. I'll be talking about another podcast about art you should be listening to, and I'm going to muse for a second on one of the interesting problems that we raised today. That's it. Enjoy the talk with Francesca. I wanted to say the reason that you're here is because of the Superflex show.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
In fact, I yelled about it on the podcast a lot. And what I really enjoyed about it was it felt very un-Danish.
Yeah.
In a way.
In what way? What do you mean?
Well, it's partially because the way that Superflex is and their work is not particularly provincial. Mm-mm. They're very much talking on a global level, and and then the interaction. I think that the idea of this sort of interaction with the public and arts is somewhat, I don't want to say a new thing in Denmark, but it's growing. It's less of a given in the art world. So, it was great. I went there and immediately, first of all, everyone was drinking beer outside, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then I went inside, and then they were making lamps. I was like, yes, I'm gonna fucking make a lamp, And this is where I love art and where I engage on that level, where it's like there's an entire room where there's just tools and instructions, and someone standing by a laser printer, and you get to make something.
Yeah.
The only disappointment was we didn't get to take the lamp home.
No.
But again, I thought it was a really good show, and then the curation was very obvious because you guys made the curation a part of the show.
Superflex invited the curators to sort of to give a different perspective on the idea of a retrospective. That's why there were so many curators involved, so everyone could somehow tell a different story.
Right, and that made a new dimension to the fact that it was ostensibly just an art show of a group of artists' work.
Yeah.
What was your guys' role exactly? You and Julia?
Me and Julia, we produced the show.
Yeah.
So we actually produced all the new works in the show, or the works that needed to be remade for the show. Like there might have been old works that just needed to be reproduced.
Right.
So we were in charge of that budget. And then together with our other colleague, Jesper Numark, we also fundraised for the main work in the show. That was the beer garden in the foyer, in the upper foyer. Mm-hmm. So this was paid for by a collector.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So was it a mix of private and public funds?
No, I think it was. I wouldn't call it a mix. It was. There was this specific work was specially funded by a private individual.
Okay.
But no, the rest was paid by Charlottenborg's budget.
Right. I guess that's a really good jump because we were talking earlier about the fact that money, the fundraising system in Denmark is under debate at the moment, and it's changing from a very strongly publicly funded art world with its pluses and minuses to a more liberal private foundation. And I feel like a lot of people here in Denmark are kind of lost when it comes to the idea of raising money from private.
I think it's a very new thing in the Danish mentality. But of course it is because it has been such a strongly publicly found culture and for so many years.
I think it feels kind of dirty to some Danes.
Yeah, it does.
In a way, it's funny because when I moved here, I felt like it was really strange to apply for money from the government. Yeah. I'd never done it before.
Well, you come from an opposite system. So
right, exactly.
It's quite interesting for you to sort of find out about how... I mean, I also come from very different systems with Italy and then the UK. So for me, it is still quite interesting to figure out how does really this system works. And I'm still in the process of understanding certain things. Mm-hmm. I think...
Do you think it works? This public funding system?
I think that the state has the responsibility of supporting culture and the arts. That said, a mixed system, I think, works better.
Yeah.
A system that mixes state support with private support. And there are various reasons for that. Sometimes, one reason is that the state has to please everyone. There is a need to be horizontal in terms of fundings.
Good point.
And this doesn't sometimes allow to a specific kind of vision to emerge. And this ultimately can damage the cultural life.
Right.
And that said, of course, it's also really great that the state is involved. And it's not only great, but it's a duty of the state to be involved in the development and support of culture.
Right.
Another thing that I have been thinking a lot about is how when the only responsibility to support culture is given to the state. How the kind of the civil society doesn't feel responsible for supporting it themselves.
It's a big thing in Denmark. People are used to the state taking care of things.
Yes. And in culture, this is also, I find, somehow can be quite problematic because if you understand art as a social act, then also civil society has to be somehow involved in taking responsibility in supporting culture. And there is this interesting debate these days, and there was an article in Politiken last week by Camilla Stockman discussing the rise of the contribution from private foundations to the art system in Denmark, or cultural in general.
Right.
And the debate is, I mean, the detractors of this rise in private funds is that they think that there is going to be a lack of democracy as a result. And I think then it maybe becomes a very complicated issue on what democracy is. And
right, you jump the rails at that point.
So,
well, what happens? It doesn't become democracy. It becomes capitalism, survival of the fittest. Those who are best at raising funds will get the money to realize projects.
Well, yes, one can see it this way, but you can also see it as there is a lot to be said towards philanthropy and patronage, which has always played such a big role. That's
the original art system.
That's where it comes from. It's the old age practice. So I also believe in a way in the vision of the individual somehow. And there has been amazing individuals throughout the course of art history, and still nowadays, that as individuals, as private individuals, do use their resources to promote culture as a philanthropic endeavor. And I think this should be supported rather than sort of slash as a sort of a capitalist and an anti-democratic system. Well,
it's certainly the direction things are pointing in here.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I don't see that as a negative twist. I think the state should continue and stretch out to support more.
Right.
There is more need for money. A lot of funds are being cut, and of course I am against this. But that doesn't mean that I don't see as a positive thing. Also, the private sector gets more involved.
Right.
With the arts.
Right.
I think arts can also bring something wonderful to companies and to employees in companies.
I think they're
bring
just
a vision.
Starting to realize that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's not just about. We're not just about the kind of like image building and marketing potential the art has, but also it can bring a vision within a company and therefore benefit also the employees.
Right.
And who works there. They can maybe touch something that they wouldn't have touched before. And ultimately our goal is to support a better and broader understanding and appreciation of art in the civil society. And this, wherever you try to sort of reach, that's just positive.
Right. Well, I mean, we were talking earlier, we were kind of looking for a theme for this talk we're having. And we talked about kind of breaking out of the cage of the art world. I mean, to go back, I was talking about how, there's the different strata of the art world, and there's kind of the upper strata, which is very selective, but also of really high quality. And you were talking more about, but that's a useless cyclical discussion to get stuck there. The point is to break out of whatever kind of level things are on. And that's a perfect point you're making about how engaging with the private, corporate, business world not only can help the arts, but it can help thought processes in that world, that they can cross-pollinate.
Yeah.
I guess I do want to go way back though and start. You grew up in Italy.
Yeah.
Were your parents artists? I mean, how did you get
No,
involved?
my mom is a psychotherapist, a Freudian psychotherapist, and my father is I guess it's called a business coach. Business coach.
Okay.
So it's much more of a business person.
So where did your interest come from?
Well, I've always been interested in art. Also, when I was growing up in school, we study art history in high school.
That's right. Italy is particularly, I don't want to say focused, but they lay more weight on that than I think they did when I went to school, for example.
For us, the humanistic culture is quite important. We have a lot of negative things, but we also have some good things.
Well, you guys are such classicists. It's so classic. I've heard about going to art
we come
school.
out of Latin culture, so it's somehow we have to sort of look at that as our direct heritage.
Right.
And Greek culture as well, of course. So I guess, I've always been interested, but it hasn't been like a straightforward road. I studied philosophy at university.
That's a mindfuck, huh?
I loved it. I'm actually thinking to go back and do another master in philosophy too.
Really? Because I went to art school.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of humanities at the school I went to. My second focus was philosophy, but it didn't make me I don't think it made me any smarter. It just made me kind of engage with the world on a more I don't believe anything level.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I love it.
You became skeptical?
No, well, what I loved is that it really, every time I left the class, I felt like I'd been to yoga for my brain.
Okay.
It really stretched out my brain. But I was never good enough to say, okay, well, I could write a paper or I could present this.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you use philosophy for is the big question. I mean,
I think that what you use philosophy for is to learn to formulate questions. I guess that's the most
smart way to put it,
important.
I mean, would you want to be a philosopher professionally? Would you want to write papers?
No, but I don't know about this, but I think it's such a great, as you say, exercise for the brain, and it keeps you looking at issues in the world from questioning perspective, which is ultimately what is interesting in life, I guess.
Right. It seems to me like it really helps relate things, or at least put things into context.
Yeah, and it's also very structured. I mean, there is a lot of structure to it. It's it's a little bit like, it's somehow it's also a little bit like math.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like logic. I never could understand logic from a philosophical level.
I also had some tough times with that. It's not really my strength.
Yeah.
But then just to continue on what happened, and then I wanted to do an MA in somehow in art. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
So you were interested?
Yeah. I wrote my dissertation in aesthetics, and I wanted to continue and do an MA in contemporary art. I think I already kind of decided that at that point. Yes. Then I had a boyfriend at the time that wanted to move to London, and then I thought maybe I will apply to study at some universities in London, and I applied at Goldsmiths, and then I got into a master degree at Goldsmiths in contemporary art theory and moved there. And
there you are in England.
And there I was, and then I stayed there for 6 years and worked in several places after my degree was over.
And became, I assume, more and more engaged in the art world.
Yeah, I became more and more engaged because I was actually working within the art world in different capacities. I worked for a brief period in the public sector. I worked for a while in the ICA, and then
what's the ICA?
The Institute for Contemporary Arts.
Okay.
And then I went on to work for a private collector, and then I ended up working in a gallery.
So what was it in that process of getting involved? What was it that grabbed you? What was it that kept you there and kept you interested in wanting to do more?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I wanted to. I mean, it's just it's a difficult question. I guess I just was interested in discovering it. So I needed to do more in order to, and I still need to do much more to learn and discover what my profession is about.
Right.
And what I really loved when I was working in the gallery was working with artists. That was
So the actual art and the people who make it.
Yeah, that was that was actually my job was to do the artist liaisons for the gallery. So I was the bridge between the gallery and the artists.
Right, right.
So I was working a lot directly with them, making exhibitions and publications and projects, in institutions or in England or abroad. Right. And there was this dialogue and this relationship that was the part that I enjoyed the most.
And artists aren't really as crazy as everyone says they are. Well, they are, but they're not as impossible, I should say. I've heard architects are the worst.
Yeah?
I'll blame it on them.
Okay. Maybe they'd be more anal.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe photographers
artists can be very anal as well. So.
What brought you to Denmark?
My boyfriend.
Did you meet him in London? Or?
Yeah, he was one of the artists I work with in the gallery.
So what did you... What was Denmark to you before you met your boyfriend?
I must say it was nothing.
Just a little foggy country?
I don't think I've ever really thought about it. I think I actually have been here once before because I was going to Kunsthal Malmö for a show with one of the artists I was working with. And I came through Copenhagen. It was February.
Oh, the worst month.
It was so foggy I couldn't actually see outside of the train, like on the bridge. I couldn't see anything.
Right. Where am I?
And I was so cold and miserable that I actually preferred to go to the airport and spend the time that I had to, the hours I had to wait for my flight in the airport so I could read and be in a warm place with a cup of coffee.
Man.
So it was a very, I don't know, it was really a nothing entity. I have no idea why life has brought me here. I mean, what is the plan? But
Denmark needed another chance.
Somehow ended here and or started here. I don't know.
Yeah. So you ended up working for Klaus Andersen.
Yeah, I worked there for a year.
Which in Klaus's gallery to me is kind of an enigma. There's nothing like it here.
No, in what
Denmark.
way?
Well, I mean, first of all, he's kind of outside. I mean, both physically, he's way outside where all the other galleries are.
Yeah.
And then he's not so engaged with the Danish art world. It seems like he doesn't really... I think he definitely has his corner.
I think it's becoming more and more involved now.
Yeah.
I think I understand what you say. It's because Klaus came and he was living in Berlin before.
Right.
And ran an artist space together with Anselm Reile and other artists that he still works with.
Right, and he brought that network to Copenhagen.
And he brought his network to Copenhagen, which is very natural. I mean, a lot of relationships and business relationships within the art world or system or whatever we want to call it are based on personal relationships and shared experiences. And that's, I think, very natural.
Right.
So Klaus brought his network here and brought the artist. There was his friends and started to show them.
Right.
And then I think he took on slowly some Danish artists, and I think now he's getting more and more into the Danish art scene. Maybe it's also a process.
Right. Well, I mean, he can't. I guess it's a bad position to be in, to be the guy who shows international artists in Denmark.
Yeah.
If he just showed Thomas Saraceno and how do you say his name? Saraceno. Olafur. Some of his big international names. Then he would just be that guy, and there's one of those in Germany, and there's one of those in England, and he wouldn't have an.
Absolutely, of course. I think that's the reason why he's getting... I mean, he has been having Danish artists for a while, but I think that he's expanding on that side of the program.
Right.
I mean, as far from what I can see.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to talk to him at some point and hear what he has to say about it. But
he's definitely an interesting guy to have a conversation with.
So you worked there for a year?
Yeah.
And did you have a plan on starting your own business?
I've been talking to Julia about this, for my business partner, for quite a long time.
Right. You guys came... No, she came a little before you,
No,
right?
she came a little before, and we met Actually, we met just before I moved, and then we started sort of hanging out together, seeing each other every now and then. And we started talking about that it would be a good idea to do something together. Mm-hmm. But then I was working in the Klaus, and then I also took, of course, my maternity leave. Mm. And after that came the possibility of working for Chart, and that was the first chance we had to actually work together. And we tried out, and it went very well. So we decided to continue.
Let's talk about Chart. For people who don't know, Chart is new. It's happened once so far, and it was an attempt to create an art fair in Copenhagen, which was. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth here. How should I describe it? Because there was an art fair here, which was, let's be honest, a little bit of a mess. Yeah. It really tried to be all things at once. And there was, way too many galleries and then just too much, there was the new galleries and the old galleries, and I'm trying not to say any horrible words here, but it was a bit of a mess, I guess we should say. But what was the vision behind Chart?
Well, Chart wants still to be an art fair with a selecting process, so that the people that participate have been cherry-picked and selected, so that the quality level of what is shown is high. Mm. And it's addressed to a very specific kind of public of collectors. Of course, it's also open to a broader public, but in terms of business, it is addressed to a specific kind of collectors.
Right, very much more contemporary.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could say it's also higher stratosphere.
There were only contemporary galleries.
Right, and you could say it's addressed to collectors, not to your average art buyer, or it's of a higher price, kind of in general. You could talk about the artwork.
Yeah, it's a higher price, but it's not only about price, but it's also about some sort of kind of research and just right.
It's curated.
It is curated, and also the galleries were, at least in last year's edition, were asked to present a curated.
Right.
Show. To sort of make an effort to present their artists or their, well, there were no traditional booths, but their space and somehow keep having an eye on the curating side of things.
Right, and there's a chance for them to pull out a different type of work, because I feel like the art fair before, they couldn't really experiment too much. A few did, Nikolai Vellner did, but for the most part, it was about getting framed pictures off their wall onto a different wall. No. And they didn't have very much sculpture, they didn't have very much installation. No. Whereas Chart gave you a space to be a little bit more, experimental. Yeah. Or, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know if it's experimental, but maybe to show different kind of, but it's also like there is difference in the architecture of the fair itself. I think that the fair and forum also has some sort of maybe architectural problems with thin walls, and so maybe it's easier to just show some framed picture in a context like that. Whether Chart being an institution sort of gave a larger.
Right. Forum was the same place you could go see Disney on Ice. A couple of weeks afterwards, it was just a multi-purpose concert hall.
Yeah,
space.
But this, many art fairs in the world are in this kind of venues.
Right.
I guess that the difference is to have a selection process that sort of makes sure that what is shown has a certain level of quality.
Right.
And that you don't encounter such different sort of levels of quality in the same place, and you sure. More or less, when you get in there, you're gonna see maybe something you like, something you don't like, but the quality is high.
Right. I was very angry about the fact that I was in San Francisco for Chart, so I missed it.
Well, you can see it this year.
Yeah. But what did you think? Was it a success? Were you happy? You guys were very involved in making that happen. How did you feel about it?
I think it was a great success. I think it was incredibly well attended.
That's true.
Beyond expectations.
Yeah.
Which also makes you wonder why people prefer to go to an art fair. Like I'm talking about the general public. Why do they rather go to an art fair than to an exhibition? And it's kind of it's a bit of a conundrum.
Yeah.
But
so
of course, from our point of view, it was fantastic. It was incredibly well attended. Me and Julia, we did a lot of things, but as part of the things we did, we curated the collateral program together with Jakob Fabricius from Charlottenburg. And very sort of interesting people came from all over the world to talk about commissions. And so I think it was all in all a great success. And we worked on it for 4 months. So it was quite also an achievement in terms of what could be realized in such a short sort of span of time from starting from zero.
Right. Well, it came out of nowhere in a way.
It was, when we started working on it, there was nothing. There was nothing, not even a work structure.
So the general public came too? The people who might just go to a Charlottenburg show?
A lot of public came.
That's good.
Now I don't remember off the top of my head the number, but I think that it was quite impressive.
That's good, and that does raise that interesting question for you about why.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You know, why would people go to a ostensibly commercial event?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't have an answer for that. Maybe because they expect that there is going to be more variety.
Yeah, it's like a great, it's a great chance to see a bunch of galleries and what they're putting forth right there.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Are you involved with this year's chart?
No, we're not.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to finally see it. But now let's talk about your business. So you and Julia have started South into North.
Yeah.
And at first, I thought it was kind of just a platform for you guys offering your curatorial services, but it's not that at all. You guys are on the production side of things.
Yes. And so far, we've been working on the production side of things mainly. We've been also doing a bit of curating, where Julia is curating a solo show with Sildo Meirelles is opening in Konstalmön in the 19th of July.
Right.
Which is amazing because it's the first solo show that Sildo has in Scandinavia and is one of the biggest Brazilian artists and one of the fathers and those of crucial figures in the development of conceptual art. So,
was this her idea to bring him here?
Yes, it was her dream to work with him. So then it's sort of through René Bloch, who has the Konstalmön. They started a discussion about if she would like to curate a show there and what would she like to do, and she said, well, I have a dream, which is to do a show with Sildo Meirelles. And then it happened, or it is going to happen soon. So that's quite fantastic, and we're very, very excited about working with him. And then of course we produced after Child, we produced the Superflex show,
right?
And now we've started a collaboration, a partnership with Charlottenburg on a program of special projects for the institution.
That's interesting. I'm going to go talk to Jacob this afternoon.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and kind of hear what his side on the whole thing is.
Ah, that's great.
But tell me, what is it you guys are doing for them? What's this collaboration?
Well, we're working with Jakob on developing a program of special projects that are going to be placed in the public space. And
is that the courtyard outside, or?
Yeah, also on the Newhound side. But
right.
The whole project is still in development, and we need to find the resources for it. So we just started. Which is what
you guys specialize in a way, right?
Well, what we want to offer is the possibility of finding the financial resources and produce the piece. So also to manage the production,
right,
of the pieces or of the works involved. And eventually what we would like to achieve is to become what is called a commissioning agency. So to be able to have the funds to run commissions ourselves.
Can you break that down for me? What do you mean exactly? So you guys have a budget.
Yeah.
And you commission artworks like permanent or exhibitions or?
Well, no, it's not really exhibitions, but we would commission art projects or art pieces that are, let's say, outside of the normal kind of gallery structure somehow. Even though it can easily be like a film, so that would also be something that a gallery produces. But it's about, I mean, I guess what is it about is to create a network and join forces and get together the right collaborators to make a project happen. So it's about bringing in the institutions, the private collectors, the public funds, and the galleries together into joining forces to produce artworks that otherwise wouldn't have the chance to be produced.
So it's about enabling, and it sounds a little bit like that means it's outside of direct commercial viability. You know, because
I guess you don't think in commercial terms, but yeah.
Right.
It's
I mean,
not
because you need the money to make it happen, but you're not thinking about the money that might come afterwards. You know, because I mean, that's the big thing for galleries is they want to be experimental. Some do. They want to try things, but they have to constantly think about their bottom line.
Yes.
They have to be able to sell what they show.
Yes.
You know, and that's one of the reasons I've got so much respect for David Risley, because he seems not to give a fuck. You know, obviously he does.
Yeah.
But you know, it's that weird balance constantly of making sure the financial realities are attended to.
Of course.
But the desire, the original reason, I mean, no one gets into art for money. Maybe they've got dreams of becoming successful and having enough money. But I mean, any young person who's like, I want to make a ton of money in life is not going to go into the art world. You know, they're going to be a lawyer or a doctor or, you know, whatever, a politician.
Yeah.
So, but that reality comes later that you have to make it financially possible. So, I mean, you want to break down the boundaries in terms like, you know, you want to create.
Yeah, but we would like to do that, but it's this is something that is happening a lot all over, and it's just very new to Denmark.
Right.
But there are a lot of commissioning agencies all over. I mean, there is Art Angel in London or Creative Times in New York, or I mean, these are big, amazing organizations that make outstanding, amazing works happen.
Is it a third option in terms of making work? I mean, so we talk about there's public support for producing artwork. There's private support. Are these commissions a third option for supporting and producing art?
Yeah, I guess so. In a way, you could put it that way. I didn't really think about it, but I think maybe it is a good way to put it.
Right, because it's not beholden to commercial aspects in that way. It's producing the art to show it.
Yeah.
And then the
I mean, of course, there are also business sides to it, but it's not the first. It's not the first. Yeah, exactly.
It seems.
Yeah.
But I mean, we talked again earlier about breaking down boundaries, and it seems like that's a lot of the most interesting, engaging artworks and art projects. I mean, artworks is almost becoming passé. It's more art projects that you're talking about. Come to be on this level. They exist on this level. You know, it's kind of like Superflex's their whole modus operandi. They make things which can't be sold most of the time, you know, which I think is fantastic because they're built like a corporation. That's part of their whole thing. Do you think that the art world is going in a third direction? Kind of trying to break down these barriers between funding options and the commercial reality.
But I think this has been, I mean, I don't know if you're talking about Denmark, then maybe this is something that it's new here. But I really think that this way of making things has been really going on for a long time. I mean, you are from the US. There is a huge tradition of commissioning works from private collectors in the US. They've made amazing projects.
Sure.
You can just think of the Menils in
system.
Texas, or
anything James Turrell does.
Yeah, and the DR Foundation, and they all sort of, they're all examples of a similar kind of practice. Of course, we're thinking in much smaller scale. We just started, and I mean, I don't want to sort of look like a fool that we are comparing ourselves to, to such big examples. But I mean, I guess that the structural idea is similar and has been already used. It's also in the UK and in Holland. They're very good with commissioning agency, and especially they're very focused on the public space and producing works for the public space. And there are some very good examples there of small agencies that make very interesting works possible. So I think it's maybe something that is new here, and it's somehow also quite difficult to explain to a system that has never seen it. But if you look outside, there is a lot of examples of this kind of approach.
Right. But I mean, the original two systems are alive and well. Not in the US. There's no public funding aside from at the top level. But, the gallery system is a heavy beast. Mm-hmm. And art fairs, as we've seen in the last years, have become bigger and bigger juggernauts in terms of the sale of artwork. They're just constantly getting bigger and more important. So yeah, you're right. The U.S. does have a long tradition of that, and it kind of touches on a really interesting difference between the U.S. and Denmark in that private, philanthropists, like you were saying, have such a powerful influence on the U.S. culturally. And that there's simply not a tradition for that here. No. Is there a tradition for that in Italy?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, the
Medicis?
the mecenate is that's where the word comes from, right? So, of course. And still is. There is many kind of small or medium-sized like sculpture parks or private collections displays or private collectors that commission works. There is a lot of this compared to here, for sure. I mean, there is also a very strong collecting tradition in Italy. Right. So even though we are a little fucked economically, we still, there still is, I mean, this is a cultural heritage that we have. Right. We have a strong collecting history.
Right. So what do you think about this idea then? The Danish government turns off all the funding for 5 years in Denmark. And then
and
the
people
private
sort of like
has to rush in to fill the hole, and then they turn on the tap again, and we have a nice, healthy balance.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a shock way to achieve it. I honestly think that the state support is very important. The state support can also generate things that are not possible otherwise. Look at how many artists also produce works thanks to state support.
Sure, this very podcast is trying to get money from the state to exist.
So I have nothing but praise for that.
I'm just thinking about the lack of a private system, although it's coming. It's clearly coming.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of people out. I mean, I think there is a lot of people out there that are ready to get more involved, but they need to be a little bit helped and guided on how to do it. It's not so easy to. Also, sometimes the owl can be a bit difficult to get close to.
Very much so.
So I think there is a lot of individuals that could get more involved, and they just need to find the ways to do it, and also to understand what they can get out of it, which is not necessarily, when there is definitely a financial side, of course, of getting involved with art, and we all know that.
Sure.
But
as with anything.
As with anything. But of course, there is also, I mean, I like to think about, for example, about collecting as an intellectual journey. It's an educational process, and it's a path of discovery. You don't become a collector from one day to another. You actually build your knowledge, and through experience, through dealing with the artists. So what we would like to convey to people is also the excitement of getting involved with the creation of a new art project, and what this can bring to your life, aside from of course, the financial. There is some sort of financial discourse.
Yeah, but I think what you guys are talking about makes that very clear distinction between selling something versus raising the funds to make something possible.
Yeah.
And to me, those are very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
The reality of having to raise money to make an ambitious project real is very different than saying, I hope I can sell this for 100,000 euros. Yeah. You know? Yeah.
Well, it does make a huge difference in the choice of projects that you make, of course.
Clearly, yeah. And you're beholden to a different audience as well.
But of course, galleries are also part of supporting this kind of projects. Galleries supported their artists in making these projects happen. I mean, they don't maybe support 100%, but very commonly they support part of it.
Well, it helps their cause. Yeah. It helps if their artist does better, so do they.
Of course.
Which is the cynical side of things in a lot of ways.
Yeah. But it's also the idea, like I like to think of what we're trying to do as an idea of an engine.
Right.
Sort of to be able to put things in motion and to, sometimes galleries nowadays they're so busy with a global agenda of art fairs that maybe in certain cases they risk to lose their engine force as also as a sort of as pushers of as pushing interesting art and supporting the development of ideas.
Right, and remaining relevant to some sort of discourse in art in general, because that can get away from you too if you're not part of building it.
But it's, for example, it's interesting because here in Denmark we can of course apply like something that we would like to do, which is not so based on a specific space or a specific exhibition program. Then it's also a gray area where we can of course fundraise for individual projects, but we cannot fundraise from public money to get funds to run a program that is not exhibition based. So in a way, also having this format, it's very new to the system. So we can't really sort of fit in and finding public money to run this as an operation, but we can of course fundraise for individual projects.
Right. Well, that's the funny thing about the state is it's slow. It's really slow. And, for example, there is no money. We were looking at the media support here. The Danish government supports media. They have money for it. There is nothing in their support guidelines, as far as we can see, which pertains to online radio.
Yeah.
There's nothing to apply for.
No.
And that's that kind of thing. Yet. They're just not really aware that, or they are obviously aware, but for some reason that hasn't joined into even though this is a worldwide phenomena. And, podcasts are slowly becoming known in Denmark. They're much bigger in the US. They're really, really big there. Yeah. And that's part of the reason we're trying to step in now is because hopefully we can be part of building something, of being part of the unveiling of the idea of a podcast to general public use, right? Which kind of brings up a point I was thinking about earlier. Do you feel like Denmark provides some unique opportunities because of the fact that there's no one who does what you do? The idea is that this commissioning artworks is new. For me, I thought, great, I live in Denmark. No one has a podcast. What an opportunity,
Yeah, I think there is definitely a point to that. I mean, it's definitely not oversaturated. Let's say that.
Exactly. And like, you know, in
it's
New
not
York or
like
London,
yeah, exactly. There is more space to do things, but at the same time, of course, you also have to fight a bit more to sort of
to redefine it.
Yes, but that's an interesting challenge.
I think it's better than knocking on doors and saying, I do what all those other people do, but I do it better.
Yeah.
That's a really awkward thing to try to...
Yeah, I mean, I guess that the fact that there is not so much going on allows you to develop ideas that seem extraordinary here, but actually very ordinary somewhere else.
Right. Well, I mean, it's also interesting.
I mean, it's just, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to shit on Denmark here. It's just...
No, me neither. As I told you, I love it here. I mean, I have... I think there are like there is interesting things here, and then there is interesting problems, and
that's a really good way of putting it. Interesting problems.
I from where I come from, the problems that there are here are very interesting for me because they're like so difficult to figure out.
Yeah.
And I find it's also interesting because when a society and it's so, well, they like to call it happy, but there's also a whole interesting discourse about what this happiness is. But when things look so good on the surface, it's much more difficult to actually point your fingers at what is actually not working, which makes a critical process more interesting. From my point of view, when a society is very torn and hierarchical, and the division between the poor and the rich is greater, and then it becomes, of course, quite. No, it's not saying easy, but it's easier to understand what is wrong, what doesn't work.
Right.
Here, there are definitely things that don't work, but it's much more difficult to identify them because they're under a surface that actually makes everyone quite okay.
Right. That's kind of the question that's really been bothering me. I feel like I became an American by moving to Denmark.
Yeah. In
a weird way, because I was in my 20s in the US, and I was very, very liberal and like, yeah, the European model, social justice and, higher taxes equals better quality of life for everyone. And now that I'm here, I'm like, yeah, but, what happened to fucking working really hard to make something happen,
Yeah.
Or we were kind of touched on it earlier, this like, well, the Danes are used to the state taking care of them. And this isn't a discussion about Denmark. This is a discussion about living in a society with a lot of comfort and things are taken care of.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I have a couple of friends who are Americans who teach here in Denmark in an art school, and their students, their dream when they're done with school is to move to Copenhagen and go on dagpenge, go on public support.
Yeah.
For jobless people. And I'm just kind of like, they were telling me, like, don't you want more? Don't you want to realize some grand dream or have a show in London or, I just want to move to Copenhagen and get free money.
And hang out.
Yeah. And that.
Okay, this is specifically lazy students that have been asked this question.
It's a hard angle, to come at. I know it's not exactly
I'm sure
fair.
there is some students out there that I must play the little diplomatic here.
And it's true. It's true. And I think that's changing slowly too in Denmark, that people are starting to kind of look around and say, well, hey, look, there's a lot of opportunities here. What can we do with this?
Yeah.
And I feel like in a way that's what you guys are trying to do with your business.
But I think that, that there is also something, I think it's so complicated to think about, it's complicated for me to think about the problems there are in such a strong welfare state society, because the principles are so good. It's very difficult to criticize the bad things that come out of it. But one important thing I think for Denmark, if we're talking about Denmark, is that it's a small society, it's a small country that needs input from the outside much more than what they're actually prepared to accept or take right now. And then we see how did it go with the recent elections. It's a society that is so scared of losing their benefits that they of course struggle to see a larger picture of sort of seeing how different cultures and people coming from different places can actually enrich the society and push and bring it forward ideas that otherwise are quite, I mean, there is so much that a society that looks inside itself can unfold.
Right.
So I think this is an issue, a political issue that also, plays a big role in this discussion, and sort of like allowing the difference to creep in. And of course, it's very difficult when you are in such a protected system to see something different as not as a threat.
Right.
So
it's become some sort of weird Rube Goldberg machine where it's overly complicated in a weird way, keeping the whole thing moving, and that involves, closing out a lot of things. But the art world, I feel like, is starting to look outwards. If we're just talking about arts, I mean, do you feel like there's a change happening?
Maybe I haven't been here enough to feel a change, maybe because I've only been here for 3 years and I'm actually really in the process of discovering this whole system.
Right.
Coming from such a different world, it also meant that it took me quite a while to figure out what was going on here. And
it
it's not
takes
just
at least a year just to land on your feet.
Yeah, exactly. And so I find it difficult to answer this question because I don't really know how it's changing. I mean, I know that definitely there were in the 90s, Denmark was really talking about the art world, Denmark was really looking out. And there was a very good, at that point, there has been a good conjunction of things that made the Danish Arts Council work pretty well in exporting Danish art. And I mean, all these people that we're talking about, like including Superflex, come out of this period. And a lot of successful Danish artists that live abroad as well.
Interesting.
I think that somehow today they're not as good as in doing this. They're not so... I don't know if it's them not being good enough, or if sometimes there are... situations that get together and then somehow the whole machine works and something comes out of it.
Right. Well, there's bureaucracy at the end of the day.
But maybe in the 90s there was a group of students that were studying in Glasgow and then made some friends, and then there was that there is always some sort of like you need to have a good strategy and then also good chances around you for the strategy to work.
Right.
So I don't know how much of these two is lacking today, but definitely the strategy is not so strong, I feel. Nowadays, there could be done more to bring more people in Denmark, to make more studio visits, to get more curators, and to visit the Danish artists. And
I feel like it's getting better.
Yeah, okay.
I've been here for these 8 years, and I've seen, I came right before the so-called financial meltdown, and there was, just galleries everywhere, and then that kind of broke down, but it was very provincial that time, and then there was kind of a restructuring, and then now it seems like, with the appointment of Jakob Fabricius to Charlottenborg, that's changed the whole system there. Chart was born last year.
Yeah.
There's been an explosion in the last few years of small artist-run spaces in Copenhagen. I feel like there is, although it's still not so international, they're starting to build the framework to make things more international.
Yeah.
And David Risley had a good point that for a country of this size, Denmark does bat above its weight, there is.
Okay, that's also a good point, of course, because one often forgets the scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, but that's no excuse.
No.
But it contextualizes things a little bit, I guess.
But what I think is that, I mean, I've been thinking more and more recently about the potential that more regional spaces have compared to the big art centers in the world.
Right.
Like geographically. And if Copenhagen wants to compete with Berlin or London, you'll never succeed in that, because it just doesn't, there is no people enough to make it.
But they could do their own thing. They could do the Copenhagen
But they can do a Copenhagen thing. They can they can run an interesting program. They can. I mean, you see what Jakob is doing in Charlottenburg.
Mm-hmm.
There is more need of more of that, actually.
Right.
More people that have, I think, in crucial positions, more people that have a vision and can bring it forward. And this will change, I think, a lot. How the art world works. And of course, it's also super good with all these artist-run spaces, because they are the engine also of is there a different kind of engine there?
Well, it's a good playground to start. That's so condescending. I don't mean it like that, but it's part of it's an important part of the structure. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it is.
And it also, I think it's good for artists to engage in a different level with running a space, having cooperatives, that sort of thing is really important to an artist's work in today's art world.
No.
Because it is no longer the model where you have a studio, you paint pictures, the gallerist comes by every once in a while, buys some paintings and leaves, and you don't engage. You know, that world is gone for the most part. You now have to be an integral part of everything. And you know, like you say, build networks, and you know, what you guys are doing in terms of just, you know, what you make as a result of what you're a part of, whether it's an art school or an art space or you're commissioning artworks based off of who you know. Like, I couldn't just walk out and say, I'm going to commission an artwork. No one would give me any money. I don't know enough artists to do it, you know, like, it's all part of what you're part of.
But the interesting is also how, another thing that I have been asking myself a lot is how come that Danish people are not so interested. The general public is not so interested in contemporary art, and it's an interesting question, I think, because the people are actually generally quite well educated here. So there is a good level of education, but still it seems like they cannot really touch. Or vice versa, that contemporary cannot really touch them, or they don't really want to be touched by it because it's a bit difficult to understand. Or so this is also something that maybe can be worked on, you know, on a sort of like on higher political levels, and sort of like helping the public and helping to communicate more what contemporary art is to the public.
And this goes back to breaking barriers in a way. Do you feel like that's the role of... Do you feel like someone has responsibility for trying to develop contemporary art to the general public?
Yes, of course.
It's not something which should just be there for the people who want it? Who want to take part in it? No,
I think that people should be helped to get closer.
Is that kind of what you see, what you and Julia do?
No, I think that, hopefully I would like to also be able to do this, of course. I would love to do that, but I'm talking more like this takes, I think it's more at a higher level. I think it's a political decision to sort of invest in bringing art closer to the public, and which also means giving funds to institutions to make public programs that engage with art, with the public, and to give them marketing money so that they can advertise, they can be visible. I think a lot of people don't know what's going on.
That is unfortunately a sad reality of the art world, is it needs to market for people's attention just like anything else does.
Yeah,
it's just the reality of the world. That's
just the way it is. I mean, people sometimes don't know what's going on.
They often don't know.
In a museum or I mean, Louisiana. People go to Louisiana, but of course it's an institution.
Yeah, that is the top tier institution.
But also you see a lot of I mean, it's also advertised more. Maybe you know what's going on. Sometimes I even have to go and look for things I mean, it's actually hard for me to get things. Right. I need to go and look for what is actually going on. And
well, Denmark's missing
if it's hard for me that I'm actually interested, then yeah.
Right.
How
even
difficult,
just to get it, right?
Even how difficult it is for someone who doesn't really engage with that.
I know what you mean. We're kind of always looking for guests for the show, and often we'll hear about it too late. Oh, this person just was here, fuck, we missed it. But Denmark's also missing, I don't know if you guys have it in Italy, but in the US, you open any local city newspaper and you can see a listing. I mean, there are some here, but for some reason they don't feel like they're available enough.
No. Well, this again, it's something that I can't really answer enough because of my own fault that I don't speak Danish. I am a little cut off from this kind of communication. So I can read some articles, but I mean, I don't really use newspapers as a tool in that sense. So I can only take what you say.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm a foreigner too, but I do read Danish. That's true. I guess to wrap it up, would you, well, first question is, would you ever consider a position working for the public as an advocate for the arts? If they called you and said, these are great ideas you have, how about a job to help us develop?
Yes, of course.
Would you like to work on that level?
Well, I mean, it depends, but if it's an opportunity to work for what you believe in or for something that it's interesting in the frame of what you would like to do, why not? I highly doubt that they would ever ask an Italian girl to get involved in the public sector in Denmark. I mean, I find it a sci-fi. But I mean...
Yeah, okay, fair enough, that's true. But on the other hand, I feel like if you look around, I may be completely wrong here. I'll take this with I'm asking for a grain of salt here. But it seems to me like a lot of the most interesting initiatives and things that are happening from foreigners. Oh, I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying that. I don't mean it like that. But like foreigners, because of their outside view on things, have a unique opportunity to bring something else to the table.
Yeah, but that's what I was saying before. I mean, it's not only because I'm a foreigner myself, but I mean, it's about like a whole society needs inputs from people coming from the outside, because then they bring different sets of experiences and different cultural backgrounds. In the art, of course, they bring different networks, and this can only be beneficial. Right. I mean, of course, one doesn't have to become, as we say in Italian, esterofilo, that you have to sort of just love what comes from abroad and take it as a given. But definitely a little bit more esterofilo. That's a good word for you to...
Estero is foreign, right?
Yeah, estero is foreign.
I'll try that one later.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one. It's like, sono diventato esterofilo. But yeah, I mean, it can just be beneficial, but not because you don't have enough here, but it's just because everyone needs new energies.
It's diversity of thought.
It's a very basic rule in a way. You know, you don't want to eat the same food every day. You just want to learn new recipes.
Some people do.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
that is true.
Well, okay. Do you have any final? I mean, you guys are working on this show at Kunsthal Møn.
Yeah.
Which is a jerk word, by the way, Møn. Do you have any kind of grander visions? Do you guys what are you guys looking I guess you already touched on it. You talked about wanting to be commissioners of
I
art.
think that's the biggest challenge we have right now is to find the fundings.
You hear that, Danish state? You hear that? But I mean, that's the thing. Like you say, it's probably going to have to be private, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, but I mean, they can always. I think that this is what we are looking at: is to get some private funds and to get together. And then also, what we would like to do that we've also been discussing with the new Marmorkonsthall director.
Oh, Diana.
Yeah,
I'm going to invite her on the show too.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
You should. And funnily enough, me and Diana have a strange common history because she was also working in the same gallery I work for in London.
Huh.
And we don't come from very far away places in Italy. And so it was very easy to sort of find a common ground there. But we've been talking about the possibility of also establishing a Danish contemporary art club. So to run a program for people that are interested in becoming collectors or expanding on their collecting practice.
Would this be consulting in a way, or development?
No, I wouldn't call it consulting. It's more of an educational endeavor. And in this case, it's not addressed to the general public, but it's more for public of people that are have the means and would like to get closer to contemporary art. So we are trying to develop a program where we would invite around 10 people, both international and from Denmark, to kind of cover all the main roles in the art system. So you have the artist, the museum director or curator, a collector, commissioning agency, auction house expert, and so on and so forth. To share their experience from a very sort of high professional level.
Would this be like a series of lectures?
It would be a series of lectures, and also the possibility of then organizing tours to the Venice Biennale or Basel, or the kind of more Documenta, the more kind of a choice of high-profile European art events. So it's a mix of an educational and social program. So there is educational activities and social activities that sort of bring together people that are like-minded and share the same curiosity towards the possibility of getting closer or developing their relationship with contemporary art. And
breaking down boundaries and making it more accessible.
Yeah, I mean, for these people I guess we would just like to like we said before, to help the people that are out there that would like to become closer to contemporary art, to give them the possibility of starting this intellectual journey that we were talking about, and then also become involved in the supporting of contemporary art, and also again abroad there is this is like you have the Contemporary Art Society in the UK that does wonders for the art world in the UK. They produce works, they buy works for museums, they have they organize lectures, studio visits. It's a very interesting structure for people that are sort of in that level. Of course, it's not something for the general public, but you need to start somewhere. I mean, we need also like a support structure in that sense, I think. Right.
Are you interested in making art accessible in the end to everybody?
Yes, of course. But as I said before, I think this is a task that
Sure.
How do you say it?
It's a long-term goal.
Yeah, and it's also it needs more than two girls to do this, right? I mean,
of course,
it is a bit, but of course, ultimately, the whole on an ideological level, art should be accessible as much as possible to a broad public, and this is what definitely what we want down the line, and this is why we're talking about art as a social act, and that's why we would like to rouse the individual involvement and responsibility towards it of the people that have the means for it.
Right.
I guess so.
I think I could go on for another hour easily on this, but I'll just have to invite you and Julia back. I think I'd like to speak to both of you
Yeah,
at
she's
some point.
super fun. I think it would be a very good idea.
So we can look forward to that.
She's a fun one.
But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
All right, that was tremendous, huh? Really interesting talk. I thought we got a lot of interesting places. And, you know, I mean, just to make this fair and balanced, I do want to say a really positive thing about Denmark. I feel like Denmark got maybe a little trashed there. That's not the point. The point is to debate. And that is what I want to say was one of the great things about Denmark. The culture of debate here is really, really good. You guys do a great job of making sure people get a chance to make a point, that people get a chance to think about a point, and then they get a chance to respond to a point. Don't go the route of the US. It's happening. I see it happening. There's a lot of mudslinging. Fucking chill. It's not the time for that sort of thing. We don't need to be yelling and insulting at each other to try to, you know, get elected to office or get our point across. So during the talk, one of the points we got to, I thought was particularly interesting. Why aren't Danes particularly engaged with contemporary art? It's not the first time it's come up on this show. It came up on the episode with David Risley. I believe it's episode number 10. He was part of an article written in Politiken called Are Danes Lazy? And it's simply about the amount of effort your average Dane engages with culture here in this country. And it's not a question which is put there to insult Denmark. It's not a question which is there to say, you motherfuckers, you know, this or that. It's a question which actually comes from a loving point. Why is that? Because we do know that people do lots of things. It's not a matter of everyone sitting around watching TV. I don't think so. So what is it? And I was kind of, you know, I've been thinking about it for the past week or so. And I'm wondering if it does have to do, well, what do you guys think? Does it have to do with the fact that the state has played such a heavy role and had such a heavy influence on culture and arts production in this country? Do you think it's taken some of the do-it-yourself, some of the excitement of I don't know, individual production or experimentation out of it? What do you guys think? Email us about that too. I think this is a really, really interesting point. A, why aren't people engaging? And B, what would it take to engage? Is it simply a cultural question? Is it just that's where the culture is at right now and it's starting to develop? You know, I mean, I'll leave it at this. It's clearly getting better. I've personally been here for 8 years and I can clearly see it's getting better. People are becoming more interested. So what is it? What do you guys think? I wish we had a phone number you guys could call in. 1-800. All right. So in closing, I just want to tell you guys about a podcast I personally been listening to for quite a while, but I really just had a binge for the last 2 days of listening to it almost nonstop. And it's a really good show. You guys should check it out. It's called Bad at Sports. It's about art, but they come from a really kind of loose and fast kind of aesthetic. They don't really have any boundaries. They're having a good time. It's been around for a long time. They're on 400 and something episodes. And, you know, because of the nature of the program, their slightly punk rock attitude towards production of a podcast, you know, it's a little inconsistent. But there have been some absolutely fantastic episodes recently. You know, there's a lot of content to choose from there, so you can just kind of pick and choose what you want. And most of all, it really reminds me of the years I spent in Chicago, going to art school, and just kind of the tone and the attitude and the experimentation of both Chicago and the New York art scene, and just kind of young people in America making art. And I think an injection of that sort of energy could really help to expand and break boundaries here, which is, you know, why not try to make things bigger? Why not try to make things more engaged? Why not try to, you know, work on all sorts of different levels, highbrow, lowbrow, experimental, you know, the whole thing. Obviously the money's there. Obviously the people are there, but there's just some sort of tone and devil may care attitude, which I think is could use some developing here. So, good place to start. Listen to the Bad at Sports podcast. We will put a link up to that on our website for this episode, along with all the other pertinent links. And how about that new website, huh? You guys like it? We think it's great. We got a bunch of exciting episodes coming up leading up to the summer vacation here. We're doing our best to make sure we don't have to skip a week during summer vacation. Keep you guys entertained out there at the beach. All that sort of good stuff. Today's episode was produced by the Undergang, once again, forever and always. Intro and outro music provided by MGT Beats. Check out a link to MGT Beats on our About page. The interstitial music today was provided once again by RC. Thank you for the music. There's a link to that on the show notes page for today's episode. Please, please, please check out our new website, undergang.net. It's high, it's tight, and it's full of great info. Peep it, click that like button, tell a friend. Also, like I said in the episode today, please shoot us a mail. Tell us about that intro. Tell us what you think about the topics we were talking about today. Tell us we sound terrible. Whatever you gotta say, tell it to us. You can send one to me personally, Ando at undergang.net. That is ANDO at undergang.net. Come check us out on Twitter. Great social media site, much better than Zuckerbook. We are the Undergang on Twitter. Link to that also on our site. You can get our episodes on our website. You can get them on iTunes. You can get them on Stitcher. We got all of that stuff up on the site. Links to it. You can subscribe. It's an easier way to get the show. And if you really want to give us a hand, you really like what this show's about, go in and write a review in one of those places. It helps other people find the show. It helps spread the word. We appreciate it if you do. In fact, we want to say thanks to Stainback Beef for giving us a 5-star review on Stitcher. So thanks for that. Alright, that's today's episode. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for engaging. Stay tuned for all sorts of great content coming up in the next couple of weeks. Talk to you guys later.